Remove Robert Kincaid's voting rights.
I am the owner of this company.
Make sure to subscribe and like the video. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for being here, and God bless you.
By 8:30 that morning, the shareholder meeting had already begun upstairs. The plant sounded different in daylight, less like a working mill, more like a hospital waiting for bad news. Down below, machines coughed and groaned. Steam hissed through old pipes. Somewhere near the loading dock, a forklift beeped in the snow. Bobby stood at the glass entrance with his lunch pail in one hand. The same lunch pail he had carried in 1968 when the first furnace was still being wired. The young guard looked nervous. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kincaid," he said. "Orders from Mr. Vale." Bobby nodded once. "What orders?" The guard swallowed. "He said you were not mentally fit to attend." For a moment, Bobby said nothing. At 74, he had heard plenty of ugly words. Slow, useless, old-timer, in the way. But senile was different. That was not an insult. That was a cage. It was a word people used when they wanted to steal a man's voice and call it kindness. Through the glass, Preston Vale lifted a folder and began speaking to the board. His charcoal suit looked clean enough to shame the whole building. His hair did not move. His smile did not warm. Bobby could see the title page from where he stood. Emergency Review of Disputed Founder Claim. Disputed. That was what Preston called 40 years of sweat. That was what he called Bobby's late wife's pension clause. That was what he called the names on those union photographs Preston had wanted thrown away. Inside the room, Preston tapped the paper. "Mr. Kincaid has shown signs of confusion," he said. The board members shifted in their chairs. Bobby could not hear every word, but he did not need to. He had spent his whole life around machines. He knew the sound of something being rigged before it broke. Then a familiar voice came from the side corridor. "Bobby!" Frank Dorsey stood by the service stairwell, wearing the same old Union cap he wore at every funeral, strike vote, and Veterans Day. "Breakfast." Alma Pierce stood behind him, clutching a canvas bag. Eddie Novak had a headlamp around his neck. Frank looked at the guard, then back at Bobby. "They locked the upstairs door," Frank said, "but they forgot who poured the floor." And that was when Bobby realized Preston had made one mistake. He thought the plant only had one entrance. The stairwell smelled like wet concrete, rust, and old cigarettes. Bobby took each step slowly, but not weakly. There was a difference. His knees complained, his lungs felt the cold, but his hand on the railing was steady. Frank went first. Eddie followed with the headlamp, muttering about bad wiring and worse management. Alma held the canvas document bag against her chest like it was a hymn book on Sunday morning. Above them, Preston was telling the board that Bobby was confused. Below them, the old crew moved through the bones of the plant. "This tunnel still open?" Bobby asked. Eddie gave a dry laugh. "Open? No. Forgotten? Yes." That made Alma smile for the first time all morning. The furnace tunnel ran under the east side of the building. It had been used in the 1970s, back when men still came in with lunch boxes, thermoses of black coffee, and snow melting on their shoulders. Bobby remembered walking this way when the plant was still young. He remembered Frank singing Sam Cooke on the midnight shift. He remembered Alma in payroll, correcting grown men who tried to cheat apprentices out of overtime. He remembered his wife Helen sitting at their kitchen table with pension papers spread beside a percolator. She had said, "Bobby, promises need locks on them. Good men die. Bad men hire lawyers." He had kissed her forehead and told her she worried too much. Now, all these years later, her lock was the only thing still holding. Alma stopped near an old junction box and pulled a folder from her bag. "I made copies," she said. "The pension clause, the founder's share ledger, Helen's notarized amendment." Bobby looked at the papers. Her handwriting was there. Neat, firm, certain. For a second, the tunnel disappeared. He was back in their kitchen, bacon frying in a cast-iron pan, WGN radio low on the counter. Helen, tapping her pencil against the paper. "Don't trust a handshake when pensions are on the line," she had said. Bobby blinked hard. Frank saw it and said nothing. That was friendship, knowing when silence carried more than comfort. Then Eddie raised a hand. Everyone stopped. Footsteps echoed ahead. Not worker boots, dress shoes. A security radio crackled. "Check the lower access. Mr. Val said the old man may try something." Bobby looked at Frank. Frank grinned. "Well," he whispered, "now it's a meeting." But if security found them in that tunnel, Bobby would never reach the boardroom. The flashlights swept across the tunnel wall. Bobby pressed his back to cold steel. Alma held her breath. Eddie clicked off his headlamp. Frank closed his eyes like he was counting seconds from an old shift whistle. The guards came closer. Their radios hissed. One said, "I don't know why Vale cares so much about some janitor." The other answered, "Because that janitor scared him." Bobby heard that. So did Frank. The old foreman smiled in the dark. Then a deep rumble rolled through the tunnel. The furnace exhaust fan kicked on, just like Eddie said it would. Steam burst from a side pipe and filled the corridor with white fog. "Move," Eddie whispered. They slipped through the steam, slow and low, past the guards and into the maintenance corridor behind the boardroom wall. For the first time all morning, Bobby could hear Preston clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston said, "this is not revenge against an old worker. This is responsible governance. Bobby almost laughed. Preston clicked the remote. A slide appeared on the screen. Sale authorization. Lakefront redevelopment package.
There it was. Not rumor, not suspicion. The plant land, the pension reserve, the Union Hall lot, all bundled together like scrap metal.
One board member leaned forward. And the pension protection clause? Preston smiled. Our council believes it can be set aside if Mr. Kincaid's founder claim is invalidated due to incapacity. Alma's face went pale. Frank's jaw tightened. Bobby did not move. He only looked down at his lunch pail. Inside was the original share certificate, the one Preston thought was lost. Folded beside it was Helen's amendment, sealed in plastic after a kitchen coffee spill in 1974. Eddie pointed to a narrow service door. That opens behind the projection screen, he whispered. Bobby nodded. Frank touched his shoulder. You ready? Bobby looked at the door, then at the papers, then at the men and women who had kept faith when the company did not. I was ready in 1968, he said. Inside the boardroom, Preston raised his pen. All in favor of removing Robert Kincaid's voting rights, say aye. Bobby reached for the handle, and just as the first board member opened his mouth, the service door began to turn. And that is where we leave Bobby for today. One hand on the door, one lunch pail holding the truth. One room full of people, ready to decide his life before hearing his voice. If this story has reminded you of someone who worked quietly, kept promises, and deserved more respect than they got, give this video a thumbs up. Like. It helps more people find Bobby's story. And if you want to see what happens when Preston Vale finally reads the name on that original certificate in front of the whole board. So, subscribe. Before you go, part 5 is where the door opens. Because the old janitor is not coming to ask for permission. He is coming to take the vote.